Shalom. Welcome to this episode for prophecy for the last hour. And really, it is the last hour. You'd have to be, like I'm saying now, under a rock not to know that everything just keeps getting shaken up. There are very few, very clear trajectories. So what is Hashem doing? That is the ultimate question. I want to focus today on Mashiach. Okay, obviously. Mashiach, so I hope you're familiar with my channel. And let me just bring in this little disclaimer. I have my new board here. I'm really set up to start teaching now what I feel like I have been, developing all these years. My research is to uncover, to unlock, to unseal, to be able to teach the sod level of understanding in Jewish scriptures, in our Torah. It's written according to PaRDeS. And the last level, according to this layering of the scripture, is this deep, deep level called the mysteries. Now, I have lots of playlists. I have a great YouTube channel, all free videos. Take advantage of it. And I have two playlists, one on PaRDeS and one on, I'm going to speak about today, the two houses of Israel. Because I'm getting real convinced. Now, this is so interesting, just watching how things are unfolding. Because really that's what we're told to do, to watch, to wait. Along with, being righteous, preparing for the king, getting your heart ready for the groom, getting to be a virgin with oil and a lamp. There's plenty of parabolic language to explain what the believer is to be about in the last days. Now, there's two archetypes. There's actually three archetypes that can be pulled out of the scriptures that I have also done a lot of teachings on. And this is a deep level understanding that this is my word to Ephraim. Because after this election debacle, and everybody's like all upset, did we get played or what happened? All these paths to victory. I'm speaking from a quote unquote evangelical perspective. And here we are. And so the question is, again, what's the plan? And I always say, again, there is a plan. We need to trust the plan. Question is, what's the plan? And like I've always said, prophecy is so much easier to be understood after it's happened, right, than beforehand. Now, I will not say that the prophets, many times, it's a tricky business. Are they wrong? My opinion, because we do not have the level of prophets today in the evangelical community of the level of the prophets of Israel. Now, this is something that has to, in humility, this has to be understood. There is a world of difference in terms of someone prophetic like an Isaiah or a Jeremiah or Ezekiel who can span thousands of years and foresee the unfolding of the Torah as regards the believer, the plan of salvation. A lot of these modern day prophets are seeing correctly something, but they do not have the context or the high level that I'm all about, of spiritual understanding, of having wisdom and understanding, chokhmah and meaning, according to the Torah sages, who are the keepers of the word. All right. So this is a problem because it is my studied opinion that we are again being played. This is why we always lose. Because he plays us, and we've got to get above him. We've got to see all of his plans of the enemy and then get above them. All right, not be subject to them. But I'm trying to stay on point here. But these different messiahs, Messiah ben Joseph, Messiah ben David, and the high priest, the Melchizedek priesthood. These are very well established kind of theological understandings that are deep and pretty dense, and you got to really look at the Hebrew, look at the scriptures, and you have to have a lot of context and a lot of deep understanding to kind of figure out, which prophecy belongs to who and what's going on when and where. But it can be done. It has been done. But a lot of these prophets, what they say is, it's kind of soulish. You can get to a level, and I think a lot of people understand this, and if nothing else, this is what sort of the New Age and the whole occultic explosion is explaining to people. What has always been in our Torah, what is in our Torah, is the different levels of consciousness. And when you do, you can tap into some different currents that are happening, be they in time, past or future, or be they with other entities, in other worlds and dominions. There's a lot going on. And this is what I'm all about now. I encourage people, I'm starting to teach classes that, you know, a little bit of paid classes, because I'm going deep, I'm going into the meat, and I really want people to be serious. So this is what a lot of my outer board is about. But today I have a message. I have a message for the church, quote unquote, and I have a message for Judah. So I have a message for Ephraim and I have a message for Judah. When I say Ephraim, according to the keys, the archetypes, Ephraim is refers to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, refers to the northern kingdom, refers to the lost 10 tribes of Israel, refers to the multiplied seed that now at the end of the age is totally the whole sea of Gentiles in the world, okay? And now the time of the Gentiles is done in the sense that the gospel, the first coming of Mashiach, has been preached in the whole earth. Now comes the end. Okay, so what's the wrap up? Everybody wants to understand, like, what is the wrap up? We're there. I think people understand that the thunderings, the plagues, the things that are hitting the earth now and that are going to be continued are the birth pains. And we are in biblical proportions. The things that are happening are affecting the whole world. They're not little localized issues with certain nations. This is Yahweh beginning to take the stage, really now, because just about everybody's plans have failed. He is getting ready to take the stage and to start to intervene in history and to make it what it is supposed to be, the end where the king comes and the king is received and his kingdom fills the earth and the knowledge of his kingdom like the waters covered the sea. So I have decided that I am, after deep study, this is very studied, I understand Mashiach ben Yosef, and my word admonition to the house of Judah is, look at I get it. I get it on so many levels. I even get the idolatry that you accuse us of, which will be in further teachings. I really do. But the point is, as children, Judah, you were not lost. Well, okay, see, I always want to cry because it's very personal. The lost sheep were divorced, kicked off the land. Their covenant with Elohim was annulled, and they were sent out to the nations. Okay, now it says very clearly in the prophets, he didn't forsake them. He did watch over them, especially the remnant, and he did give them special status because ultimately they are his children and they are firstborns. And he said he would renew, he would, whole new plan would happen, and he would renew a covenant. He would graft them back in. He would bring them back into the household, which is now where we are with Messiah ben Joseph 2,000 years ago. See, that's personal. As Gentiles, as these people that were outside of the covenants of Israel, we didn't have a knowledge of the high God of Israel, Yahweh Elohim. This is before even Christianity came on the scene. You understand? The fact that this Mashiach made a way and really did fulfill all these scriptural requirements as a lamb who taketh away the sins of the world. These are very deep, legitimate, parabolic, accurate understandings according to the plan of salvation that the prophets of old, the prophets of Israel have laid out. But that has happened. That's done. And what it did is, you have to understand, Judah, that brought all of us back into the house. There's no way I would have gotten back into the house worshiping the God of Israel through a Buddhist path. I mean, where's that going to take me? Or through a real New Age path. That's not going to take me to the High King. Where, what, pagan, just stay an atheist? That's definitely not going to take me to the High King. The only path out there that's going to take me to the High King is the path now through Christianity. And I just have to say, it hasn't been perfect. It has been quite bumpy in the relationship between, quote unquote, the two sisters, but it's what I say the Father had to work with. So here we are, and it's all about now the reunification of the whole house of Israel. All 12 tribes are going to recognize themselves as the children of Elohim, take on their birthright responsibility of the firstborn, and we have a real big job to do, all right? Which is to turn around and kick butt, but which is why we didn't do it this time. Okay, this is my opinion. Why did it kind of fall apart at the end, in a sense? Which it didn't. It's just that you understand, salvation comes in stages, and we have a lot of information still that is not integrated into our understanding. All right. Now, I consider myself, look, I quote unquote, technically, I consider myself to be post-Christian. Actually, I don't like that. I'm not post-Christos, because Christian comes from a word Christos, which means the anointing, which means understanding. I'm not past understanding. Matter of fact, but I'm past having just the evangelical or the Christian understanding of Torah. Yeshua was a Jewish rabbi. I mean, just like 101 should tell you that you need to approach him, his teachings, the whole concept, his mission, everything in the context of the Jewish Torah and the sages. Okay, not necessarily quote unquote modern Christianity, and that's where we got it wrong. Because Ephraim and the prophets who you prophesied over this thing, you don't quite yet know who you are and how you fit into the big picture. Okay, so according to the Rambam, one of the greatest Torah sages, all right, he wrote this whole treatise on the 13 principles of faith or belief that every even nominal Jew, and basically I encourage anyone who is considers themselves under the banner of the high God of Israel to go and just Google Rambam 13 principles of faith and see if you believe them. Because one of the principles of faith in the coming of Mashiach. Now, each house has, it seems, this is going to become very, has a Mashiach in the sense. Both have, I mean, for all peoples, but predominantly the Mashiach of Yosef really did bring in back into the house the lost sheep of the house of Israel and any righteous Gentile, anyone who wanted to come in through that door. That's a fact of history. All right. And Judah has come back to the land. Judah, who was totally exiled and almost annihilated in the last, has hung in there and come back to the land and established, most importantly, the city of Jerusalem, and is in terms of having the Temple Mount is back in the land, in the vicinity, in the geography. These are very important things. Those are what when you say Mashiach is that like these are processes. Everything about God is a process, if you've ever noticed, right? I mean, he doesn't really, prayers usually get answered in stages, all right? It's according to how much our vessel can handle all the light that we want, all right? Now, this thing about the 13 principles of faith, believing in Mashiach, all Jews, Orthodox believing Jews, would believe in Mashiach. But this is where you have to understand deeply how the plan of salvation is worked out with the two houses and the different birthrights. And Judah had their Messiah that is sort of like what they will be rewarded with for their faithfulness, all right, is a Messiah ben David kind of archetype, where the kingdom, and you understand, the kingdom, we are not talking about a physical ruling and reigning kingdom on earth in physicality with real government that would have real people, with a real city called Jerusalem, with a real king, will become the mode of government for the next millennium. All right, now how do we get there? This is the Messiah ben David. This is why the archetype of David is such an important story, and it to the king. First of all, the thing about David we have to understand. First and foremost, there's many things about Joseph you can understand. Melchizedek, that's been unpacked, but let's look at Joseph. One of the things people don't really understand, especially Christians, and I'm not picking on you. I'm just saying, I once was there where I really had a high level of ignorance. In humility, this is my word to even, you have to understand you have a high level of ignorance of the Hebrew scriptures from their Hebrew perspective, what they're really saying in the Hebrew. Not a westernized, kind of Hellenized, kind of paganized, kind of, Greek understanding. Now that really is a truth. That really is what is in our writing, why our different worldviews, okay? Why it's hard for a Christian to reconcile into Judah's house, and it's very hard for Judah to reconcile into a Christian's house, of faith, because of the level of ignorance. Okay, but this idea of a Messiah ben Joseph, David, you can see this with the ruling Sanhedrin when they questioned Yeshua and they said, well, okay, are you the king to come? King. They didn't tell you the savior. Are you the, or some of the other epithets? Are you the king? They were looking for a military king, someone who would come back and establish Jerusalem as the city of God on the earth. And really, it's my opinion, okay, the whole earth belongs to the Father. So when this thing is wrapped up, we will be ruling and reigning in the whole earth. Everyone in the whole earth will be subject to the rule of this king that will be residing in Jerusalem. So it's really about the city, and the whole area becomes like its jurisdiction. Ezekiel's temple, when you look at it, it's much bigger, has many more room and spaces they allocated for a much more ruling elite, actually a ruling elite class of priests and sages and different Levite working in the whole operation of the temple. So, but let me get back to this. So one of the things that this Mashiach ben David does, well, let me say this. Okay, this is what gets a little confusing to people, because what I'm talking about, 99.9% of Christians, I'm sorry, I know you never heard that, and I am sorry. And most Jews don't really pay attention because for their own reasons. Okay, but it says that one of the main things that the Mashiach will do is the ingathering of the exiles. And this is where our first little breakdown occurs, because to most Jews, that really just does represent the coming back to the little geographic land of Israel, and then a couple people groups that we can find in the world that definitely have connection and even genetics to that. And that's great, but that's sort of not like, that's like nothing compared to what the Torah is talking about when it talks about the multiplication of seed that is going to happen in Ephraim's house. And that this great multitude at the end of the age is going to be all over the earth, and it's going to come from the four corners, which is a kind of north, south, east, and west. It's going to be a worldwide phenomenon of people coming in, and that's what it's saying, streaming up into the mountain of the Lord, which is another epithet word for, the temple at Jerusalem. They're going to come to this place to learn, to worship, and to pray to this high God of Israel, who is now ruling and reigning. Okay, that's the archetype for Messiah ben David. But the ingathering, okay, these bringing these people, has a process, and this is, the rabbis will tell you this. This is known, except it's not known to the point where it's taught in such a plain way, in a Peshat way. Okay, that these last 2 days, see, so again, rabbis chunk time, or sages, we've had 6,000 years to human history, right? So from Adam, so we're talking about from Adam, not what happened before, didn't necessarily what's going to happen after, but 2,000, 2,000, 2,000 is 6,000. So they have, I think the first is the 2,000 years is the time of the patriarchs. I think the second 2,000 years is the time of the Torah. And the last 2,000 years is known as the time of the Mashiach. It's called the footsteps of Mashiach. And this is a time where they see that the Mashiach is going out into all these, and he is gathering in the exile. This is something that, an adjustment on the mind of Judah, and I get it, but I think people are ready for it now, is that, we're not Edom, we're not, the remnant that has been in the house of Ephraim has carried on a very important portion of the birthright, and these lost sheep are grafted back into the house. I admit it's not a very high level of understanding, but it's completely adequate to bring them back into, quote unquote, the all Israel relationship. And now again, at the last days, when every hidden thing is going to be brought into the light, and when this Torah, this will be taught in all the earth, and all the earth will get it, all the peoples in the earth will get it, all of these understandings, because this is part of one of the hidden understandings, is going to come to the light. Now, so over the last 2,000 years, we really have had the ingathering of the exiles. Now, obviously, Judah has had a very fast-tracked ingathering in the last 100 years. And this is why, this is another very interesting piece of this thing, because Judah, the way they are set up according to their birthright, and the way they are always like a very visible sign. See, Ephraim got lost visibly, just like Joseph. He went down to Egypt and he kind of got lost. They didn't know where he was, and he knew who he was. Always he knew who he was, that he was a prince of Jacob. I mean, son of Jacob. I mean, seriously, but the high God of Israel. But the Israelites didn't really know who he was, and he was not recognized. And his people, until the time the whole story is over, and they come down to Egypt, the brothers, and there's this big time of the revealing. And this is allegorically kind of what is going on right now. I will say it's a little bit messy, but whatever. It involves people, so it's going to be messy, right? But this is something, so the ingathering is something that's already happening, been happening, and I believe there will be a last huge, because part of the whole reason for the birth pains and things amping up like they are is because it's time to get everybody in the house, one way or the other. You got to make a decision. There's no more time to be in the valley of indecision. you got to become a son of God, or you're going to be a son of Belial, or the son of Lucifer, son of Satan, well, whatever you want to use, whatever epithet. Okay, so that's been going on. So Ephraim, and this is the other thing that Ephraim, aka, remember, Christianity, you didn't replace the church. See, this whole thing of replacing theology, gotta go. You need to understand, we did not replace Judah, or any of that in the covenant. It's only one covenant. We are renewed into the same covenant at Sinai through the finished work of Yeshua HaMashiach, which I take very personally, because he really did come. See, I wish I didn't get so emotional. And reveal himself, okay? And the word is powerful and true, and he said he was the bread of life, and he has fed people spiritually through. Okay. He has fed people spiritually through, just a cursory, really low-level reading of the Old and New Testament. That's how powerful the word is. Anyway. So these Gentiles have been redeemed with a price. They were paid for by the blood, the nephesh blood of the Lamb. Okay, now, Judah. We're not all Edom. I get it, because by your fruit you shall know them. I get it. And there is definitely an Amalekite seed in there. I get it. I see it. The Canaanites, I see this Luciferian Kabbalah, that the church, and even Judah times, they tolerate stuff that just allows these infestations to grow up in their midst. But to Judah, we are not all Edom. And but even though, to look at us to see that the multiplicity of the seed, the multiplication, the prosperity, the abundance, the purposes that has been given to us, and it is upon us. And that's why America, with the greatest seed of Ephraim that the world has ever seen, who for the first 200 years of our nation, well, actually even before, because for about 100 years and maybe we really were, by and large, a huge Torah-keeping people. We believed in the commandments of the God of Israel. We based our government. We decided as a people that we were going to exalt righteousness. All right, and these things paid off very well. We became exactly what the Father said, a prosperous, predominant force in the world for good. We really did. I mean, I don't buy into this whole, I don't know, truly, sometimes I just don't really pay attention. Is that what cancel culture is? You'll have to tell me. Well, all of a sudden, all the people who are righteous are somehow the bad guys, right? Okay, and well, I don't want to even go down that road. But what we have to understand is this birthright of prosperity has really manifested in America. It isn't all our ingenuity and our hard work, our values, the things that made us great. These are all Torah-based character type of, how you live your life with character and ethical qualities, and mitos, which is character, and keeping the commandments. That was America, really. And I hope people aren't going to say that was America until 2020, the election. All right, because something has radically shifted, and this is how is this going to end up? That's what I want to go to. All right, so a couple more things you have to understand. This is why the ingathering of the exiles, one of the main things that the Mashiach, the whole concept of Mashiach does, is been happening, and in both for Judah and both for Ephraim. But some of the other things, this is what's really interesting that people need to know about King David. He was an insanely, how do you say this, in love with God. And he wrote the Psalms, Torah sage. I've said this a lot. He was one of the most masterful Torah sages of all time. And it's not as emphasized so much because he was such a great military leader. That was the thing where he was establishing Israel and their borders. They were living peaceably. They were established as a sovereign nation under Yahweh Elohim, and nobody oppressed them. Okay, and they could live their lives according to Torah, like it says, pursuing life, liberty, and and the pursuit of happiness, which is Torah based, which is just a multitude of blessings. Just pour out the blessings. Okay, but the other thing that the Mashiach will do, This is the Mashiach ben David, and this is one of the things that also David did. The restoration of the religious courts of justice in Israel. Now, this is something that I think we're getting warmed up to. As there was evidence that the courts, see, the thing about Judah and Ephraim, the thing about them, they believe in Torah law. That was our foundation, the 10 Commandments. You know, the day we took the 10 Commandments out, our classrooms, everything has been going south since then. That is the foundation for ethical, civic, personal behavior. It doesn't change. And really, you can carry it to the nations are really under a very similar thing called the Noahide laws. God does not hide himself, his laws. It is there, but it's very, you know, of course, with the prince of the power of the air want us to really know and understand and believe in these Torah laws, that these are good for us and that this will give us all the blessings and prosperity and healing and abundance, you know, health, strength that we need. Okay, so it's always a battle is in the mind. So this restoration, when we had a path to victory, there was quote unquote a path to victory through the courts. It was such an interesting, because now I'm, like I said, archetype of what would be going on in heaven, because there are courts in heaven that render, you know, this is what the Torah says. I mean, I don't know what they look like. I don't know what they're wearing. I don't really know. You know, they're very incorporeal that way. But there are courts in heaven and there are witnesses. There is a whole system that goes on where our actions individually as nations are judged. And we receive, you know, either blessings or curses. That's what it says. And then that comes down to us. That's what's going on through the heavens, the Mazal, the influence. You know, you're going to reap what you sow one way or the other. Okay. And it's all done very, really mathematically and according to justice and in a way. And that all goes on in the courtroom of heaven. And this is all talked about, okay, in literature. But Israel was patterned after these judges, this whole concept. And this is one of, again, this is in the Noahide laws. This is one of the Torah that you must have just courts. That's what Yahweh says. He says, listen, I know you're not going to do everything perfectly. You must be able to bring the lawbreaker to a group, and he must be judged fairly, you know, squarely. But if he deserves punishment according to Torah law, he needs to get it. This is how you keep the fear of God in people. You cannot have lawlessness. Now, obviously, this is the interesting theologically. You don't have Sharia law in the sense that that's so harsh. This is the point. Just because somebody steals a loaf of bread because they're starving and they can't, you don't cut their hand off. That's not justice. Okay, that's called swift judgment. That's not what the Father's about. The flip side is you cannot keep letting, like your child, you cannot keep letting them put their hand on a hot stove and thinking that that's somehow good parenting. You know, mercy, you know, just because a kid or somebody wants to do something doesn't mean it's good for them. There's this whole concept in Torah about balance, the middle pillar, about justice. Things are done right. Okay? And everybody is dealt fairly, squarely. Yahweh does not, you know, the senator should not get special treatment. You know, whatever. If fraud is fraud, no matter who commits it, this is the thing. We need to get to that point again. And that was the point that Israel had right after they came into the promised land. That was established. That men of principle, men of character, men who knew Torah, men who believed it, lived it, just would be in these positions of judges. And, you know, like anything, you would rise through the ranks. And the great judges of Israel, Deborah, and these, you know, and I use Deborah because she was one of the judges, able to achieve such a high level of, again, wisdom and understanding, the highest level, which will be able to, where you can come down and look at the whole situation and administer true justice. Okay. And this takes a lot of Torah study. It takes a lot of mature character. This is why, you know, this is why in the New Testament they throw it. Don't put a novice, a newbie, in charge of a lot of things where they have to make big decisions that affect people's lives. They just don't have the experience and the character. All right. This concept of the judges, this morphed into the Sanhedrin. This is where Moshe, the father, tells Moshe, listen, get 70 of these kind of men, heads of the clans, established, men of character who are not swayed, will not take a bribe, know how to stand morally fast in their moral conviction, know how to keep their family and their children, how to love their wife, all these larger pictures of life that make, these are people that are true, tested, and tried. But the problem, well, I'll get to this. So this had morphed into 70 elders, and these people were able to help judge all the disputes in Israel and kind of keep a level playing field amongst all the tribes. Now, there's also, it says, if you read it closely, the restoring of not only the courts of justice, but the legislators. There's a word in there, and I think it's called their advisors. This is in, I don't have my read him reverse for this. Okay. But it says that the advisors is like the legislator. Again, I said this is where we get our three branches of government. Where you have kind of a king, we have a much better concept of president as that. But you have your legislative and you have your courts. All right. And it's supposed to be a checks and balances, because if the courts get corrupt, well, maybe you can have legislators who can pass just laws and influence the courts to interpret them. I mean, there's a whole way. But right now, it seems this is what we're facing, this cabal, which I absolutely believe it is. This Luciferian deep state cabal has got themselves into such a bloating, because it's not a real position of power. And they are wielding it very strongly. And that's why we need to understand this principle, what's going on, the warfare that is coming against us. Okay. But so what's the plan? How, because a lot of me, I say to people now, it's like the persecution that, even right now today, I mean, if you are a Trump supporter, or if you, God forbid, were at the Capitol, or if you were a supporter of Trump in the legislature, or if you were a famous, CEO of a major company and who just happened to be a big donor and a big supporter of the president, you're getting your heads chopped off now, figuratively. Shut down out of the marketplace, denied. Linwood denied. They're taking your name out of your alma mater, out of professional clubs. I mean, the purging. This is unheard of. This is America. I mean, who are these people? This is what I keep. Who are these people, and how are they getting away with this? Then you flip it. And it's like, oh yeah, okay, this beast. It's a beast is in power right now. They think they are, okay, and they are to a certain extent. I'm not going to deny reality to a certain extent, but ultimately, my reality is in the kingdom of heaven and the higher understanding. But who do these people think that they are? All right, but this idea of having just judges and just legislators who will not be subject to a bribe and all this, who will be able to remove this, and so remove the heavy burdens. That's what it says. Off of the people, their sorrow and their groaning, like Moshe did and Aaron. They're to bring the children of Israel out of Egypt, because of all their lives were made miserable. They just servants, just dogs working for the Egyptians. Their thumb was totally on them. I mean, these are real economic. Talk about an oppressed people. Okay, but this is something that, in a largest picture, Mashiach ben David will do for the tribes, because I think what we have to understand now is we're not really talking anymore. We're kind of the globalists versus those who are still loyal to the high God of Israel. Okay, it's really what it's coming down to. All right, and this Messiah ben David will begin to come and establish the righteous rule of the high king of Israel, which means establishing in the courts, again, the 10 commandments. Like when people get in the, and this is why when they're talking about military tribunals and stuff, I mean, it's such an interesting, where would you get, because when we're at this level where Israel, people, okay, this is what gets into, the famous story, and people can't understand it. I think it's Phineas, and he goes in and he literally, with a sword, he just cuts the head off, I think, of this couple that's in their tent, defying Elohim, having sex in the middle of the day, while, totally inappropriate, everything about it, totally inappropriate, totally against Torah, totally. And let me just say, it isn't just the act of sex, okay, that's not what the issue is, really. It's one of the issues. But the point is, the woman, if you trace it back, if you understood how the histories have been kept for us, she was from, and I believe I have a geography, she was a princess of one of the kingdoms that was right next to the southern kingdom there. And this alliance would have made a real pickle for Israel to remain sovereign. See, this is one of the things. Don't marry the foreign wives. Don't get involved. Don't make these alliances and treaties. It's only going to complicate matters. You know, you're going to be bought. You know, all these things. This was a very, very bad political move for Israel to allow at that time. They needed to have, Father started out with really high standards. And if you will keep these standards, I mean, you will always be the head of the nations. You will always be the premier proponent and people of Yahweh Elohim. But, you know, again, history in hindsight. But there's a little more information about what was going on there. But this idea that Mashiach will establish these courts. So a lot of these, and if you look at the militariness of David, he was extremely, and they said, you know, smart, cagey. He was not a mass, he was strategic. See, this is one of the things, this Mashiach, I don't believe we're going to have. I mean, the enemy wants to throw us into World War III and all this chaos and stuff, and we need to fight that totally. But Mashiach will, I believe, enable us to have military victories over this very strong Luciferian Kabbalah, because they are armed to the teeth. He will allow us to go in, to raid them, to shut them down, to be able to eradicate their influence and their infrastructure of lawlessness, the deep state, the economy that goes on. That is something that he will do. And I'm looking for it. This is why, I guess what I wanted to say in preface in the beginning was, I am looking for Messiah ben David. I mean, he's a real person. I believe he's born. He's alive today. I don't know, you know, but this is biblical. This is what the Jews, they're looking for this guy. And now, because it's the same, you know, people were under the same God, we're on the same plan of salvation, we're trying to come together. I'm like all over it. Yeah, Messiah, come. And this is where the Christian, we need to get a little bit of our pie in the sky. This, you got to get away from that, because this is a much more boots on the ground kingdom establishment. This is why, again, I encourage you, I do encourage you, Christian, if you have a heart and a love for the truth, well, I would say take my class on the keys, because we need to understand how Hebrew words, especially their three-letter root words, are already keyed into deep, established theological truths that change not. So you can throw out your translations, but we do have a problem there. We have to go back. That's why it says that, you know, 10 Gentiles are going to grab the hem of one Jew and say, teach us about your God. Bring us to this place where we can worship on this high mountain. You know, parabolic for going back into the mind of the Torah sages and the understanding of scripture there. This is a real phenomenon that's happening. So the other thing, I have two more points that this Mashiach is going to. So not only is his military prowess in literally, I mean, he's not going to, listen, people, this battle is against the sons of Belial. He's not going to go after Russia. His fight is not with Russia. His fight's not going to be with you know, Guatemala. His fight is with the wicked, who unfortunately are infiltrated in all the governments of the world. Especially, we know this now. And the rooting out of these particularly extremely wealthy, influential, you know, wicked is going to take some great finesse. And it's going to take the strength of the two houses. It's going to take the covenanting back together, working in harmony and relationship of the two houses to get this job done. Because we're not fighting flesh and blood. This isn't about people. This isn't about nations. When the Bible is using the word nations, it talks about, uses a word, 70 nations. Okay, that's a code word, 70. We've got over, I don't know, I think it was like 220 nations in the world today. I think I'm in the ballpark. So what do you do? He's only upset with 70 of them. What do you do with the rest of them? No, it's a phrase. It's talking about collections, a group of, I don't know how to get, of all right, 70 nations that are still antagonistic towards the God of Israel. They will not submit. In behavior. Oh, I don't want to get into this. See, it isn't that like Guatemala is a problem. We got to go. It's within cultures, there is still wickedness. There are still pagan practices. There are still Luciferian things that go on with young children, with babies and young children. This has got to stop. This stuff is real. Let me tell you something, people. I'm a primary text researcher. It is in the literature. This problem of drinking human blood and sacrificing children, and this is nothing new. This is in the literature, in all ancient literature. This has been going on. Undercover, sometimes it was so out in the open, and that's why God had to finally just judge some of these cultures. I mean, just forget it, just totally out in the open. Some of them, especially in American place like today, it's much more hidden. So it has to be ferreted out. That is a role for Messiah ben David, to ferret out those. They're called. This is all right, because all right. Let me just finish that one. That's the restoration of the courts of justice, the judges and the legislators, true people of Elohim who will administer his law in faithfulness, in truth, without accepting a bribe, where it's justice for all. No matter, the king doesn't get better justice than the tenant. Okay. Now, the end of another thing that this Mashiach is going to do is going to usher in an end to wickedness, sin, and heresy. I mean, wouldn't you? That's how we're going to get to live in a peaceable kingdom. As these, and they're called really, in the Amidah, they're called, I have influencers. Here, let me get my one. Because there's a part in the Amidah that really trips up Christians. They think it's talking about them, and I don't think it really is in its biggest picture. It says, let there be no hope for informers, and may all the heretics and all the wicked instantly perish. May all the enemies of your people be speedily destroyed, and may you swiftly uproot, break, crush, and subdue the reign of wickedness speedily in our days. Blessed are you, Adonai, who crushes enemies and subdues the wicked. Listen, that's what people who are awake today, and we understand how our world has come under this insane cabal, these Luciferians who are just running every single part of our life and culture, and now our elections and everything. So it's yeah, who can make war with the beast? That's what we got here today. Who can make war with this thing? All right? These multinational corporations shutting down all free speech in America, while most people are just sitting there still, watching at home in COVID, behind closed doors with their mask on, just watching it like it's some kind of TV show, reality show going on. Well, yeah, it's a reality show, and it's really going to affect your life if you don't wake up. But the point is, this Mashiach is going to have the host of heaven behind him and with him in such a level to be able to speedily, instantly perish and break, crush, and subdue the reign of wickedness. See, people, this is part of it. Ephraim just doesn't believe. That's why you don't believe these conspiracy theories, because you don't believe that people can be that wicked. Basically, because you're just a good person, you don't think like that. But the Bible tells us to be wise as a serpent. We live in a world where obviously there are people who don't play by the rules. Okay? And many of them, I've said this before, I keep saying, we have to understand the wicked prey on the righteous. They don't leave us alone. We want to leave people alone. Let everybody live their life, in freedom and liberty, pursuing happiness according to Torah, under God, and everybody be great. But unfortunately, there are those who really do plot. And this is what we're seeing playing out. Unbelievable plots against the righteous. But that's going to happen because mankind is, this is one of the things that Yahweh is going to be understood, that people really are ready now. You can only, what do they say? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. I mean, everybody want peace. We want peace. The planet wants peace. All right. But how are we going to get it? Well, we have to accept. This is something that Ephraim, again, I speak to Christianity. You have to come back and parse your scriptures correctly. The law was never done away with. You don't do away with the law of Yahweh. I mean, like, now I look at, oh my God, what were we thinking? I wasn't thinking. That's the problem. All right. Things like the 10 Commandments are enduring, eternal, the ethical, moral, civic laws for just societies from Yahweh Elohim. You don't get around it. That was the covenant at Sinai. He said, you live a very high standard of life, and I will bless you and make all the nations be so jealous and want to be part of, of this nation that I'm building of you people. And this is what's happening. But pretty soon it's really ramping up now, and people need to understand. We need teachers. If you pray for people who will love the truth more than this world. What can I say? You have to love the truth to be able to preach these things with boldness and courage, and you have to be able to take on some of these strongholds. This is something that Messiah ben David will be able to empower people to do. David was a huge champion of Torah. He weighed decisions he had to make. He took some of the stories. See, again, Christian, I encourage you, read the Midrash, read the histories, the books of histories that are read the book of Joshua. Begin to understand the background, the backstory of all of these great biblical people. They have a story, they have a context. And then the people that around them are also in that story and context, and you begin to put it all together. Really big admonition. You need to know your history. Otherwise you repeat it. So anyways, this end of wickedness, sin, and heresy is going to come about because people are going to begin, and they are to accept. I'm telling you what, there is a move of this, and I see it in the Patriot, whatever it's going to be, and I believe it will be, because it's time. It's have a third party, and the Patriot Party, the We the People Party, the MAGA Party. I don't even care, because there is a remnant. There is a core fundamental understanding amongst that group that God has to be at the center of this thing. There's acknowledgement, so they have not thrown out the God of Israel, which I can't say the same for quote unquote right now, or what is called the other side. I cannot say that. They want all the gods to be the same. That's all the gods of the nation. Doesn't matter. Everything's fine. Everything's permissible. Doesn't matter. Whatever. You figure it out and you do it, and we'll protect you. No, that's not how it works according to Torah, okay? So the end of wickedness, sin, and heresy, it will produce the end of war and hunger and greed, because these behaviors will not be allowed. The people who practice them will be persecuted. Everything will come out in the open. People will be on the same page. This is going to produce a millennium, a paradise, where everyone can flourish, because it will be a level playing field for everyone. All right? There will be, and these are all some of the things that Mashiach is going to finish instituting, because, so you got to understand the process of salvation. We're at the end of the age, so now it's a wrap up. We need to bring everything in the house together under the management of the Son. And it is the sons. We are the sons of Elohim. But remember, there are rules to the house. The Father has rules on how he wants his house run. These parabolic, are not hard to figure out. So there will be reward to the righteous. This will be one of the most exciting things. And I don't want to get into my concept of the resurrection and, of these different things, but there's been a promised reward to the righteous who have endured and suffered under much affliction at the hand of these evil, quote unquote, overlords, so, and I encourage any patriot today to stand your ground. It is far from over. But I think we have a season now where, yes, the prophet saw something in Trump, and I believe that because I do believe he has an archetype over him. Okay, I didn't say he was Messiah. I didn't say any of that. But you understand there are levels of archetype in our life. Okay, I'm a female. I have an archetypal role. Persona of the divine feminine. I'm a female. How can it not be? So these are things that so the righteous will be rewarded. And let me see, the other parts of it, and these are parts that belong with the kingdom. Because remember, kingdom represents the kingdom on earth. That's the kingdom we're talking about. The kingdom of heaven, the throne room, the high throne room where the king presides, will be established on earth for all the creatures. All right? You're not going to get to, make up your own way anymore. All right? And believe me, you're going to be much happier. But rewards to the righteous, the rebuilding of the temple and the rebuilding of the establishing again of the line of David. This is awesome because to Judah was given. If you read Paul, if you're a believer in the New Testament, you know, the understanding Paul had, he said, look at Judah has these things. Judah has the temple. They've kept the covenants. They've kept the temple worship. They've kept the writings. You know, the line of Mashiach, which is the line of David, has all been kept within it. So they get to establish it again, right? It would only make sense. All right. So these things, that is why, yeah, there's a lot of swirling around of the rebuilding of the temple. And it will have, because a lot of the reason for this is because it's the biggest object lesson, as I said, in the world. I mean, to teach people how this knowledge of Elohim that's supposed to cover the whole earth. How do we do this? Where do we get this? We get this in, you know, and this is why the heads of households are going to have to go down to the temple 3 times a year to learn this stuff, okay? And to bring it back to their jurisdictions and to teach their people again. The deep hidden meanings that is in these festivals of how to live and please God and how to receive his blessings, okay? So this is what is going on. All these mysteries are being revealed now. Now I have a real, I don't know, I have something I'm wearing the pit of my stomach because I understand how the enemy works. He loves to set up, you know, dualism, 2 sides against each other, and then let them duke it out. And then that just produces much more chaos and bloodshed and, you know, every evil work. But that keeps the energy level that he needs to feed on to stay in the world at a very high level. But if that gets eradicated, all right, those people get weeded out, ferreted out, they get put before courts, they get judged, they get locked up. This behavior is not tolerated. It says that will in and of itself will cut down crime. I mean, it'll be a deterrent. Okay, it's a deterrent to the wicked to cease and to desist. You know, there's so many things I could say, but I don't want to say it. All right, so now see, the reason is that these mysteries, some of the, you know, and okay, so I call him Messiah, and that's what the sages call him, Messiah ben David. This concept of the strong figure who will emerge, a Mashiach personality who will fulfill these things. Much of this, like I said, the ingathering and a lot of this turning from wickedness, sin, and heresy has been already happening, you know, through Messiah ben Joseph within the camp of the Gentiles. It really has. You took Western civilization 2,000 years ago and all the hordes, and they became quite the bulk of it did kind of fruitfully manifest in quote unquote Western civilization. And yeah, it did produce a great civilization, all right, which is now totally under siege because again, if you lose your foundation, you don't have any leg to stand on. Okay, so I am, like I said, I just am pretty excited because I think this is a time when Christians, like I said, we need to rethink Christian eschatology, obviously. And I don't think it's a time to be recriminations and to be like, it's a time when something like something to examine your precepts. Well, did I have the correct precepts? Because context for prophecy is everything. I mean, most Christian prophets today or pastors, they don't even understand the concept of the 2 houses of Israel. So they don't even know who they are. So they don't even know how to take a lot of these verses and these things that they're seeing in Isaiah and put them in their true Hebraic context without all this replacement theology thing clouding their mind. There's a lot of work to be done, but I believe this work can be done fast. I believe this can be done by the remnant of the people that will humble themselves and call upon the name of Yahweh, and the next phase of the plan will emerge. But the things that we have to do, we have to be awake. Freedom is not free. We are so close to losing it. I do believe that this is still just pressure being applied, where we will forcefully rise up and take our positions as sons of God to rule and enforce righteousness in the earth. That is one of the most important things, believer, that we need to do. We need to speak and to stand up and to demand justice according to Torah. Okay? Now, so a lot of these things have been going on, but I really believe we are going to start seeing, and I am looking for. Now, this will be very interesting because, yeah, you know, I I hope I don't pick the wrong person. I hope you don't pick the wrong person. I don't hope we don't fall into a pre-planned dualistic showdown between Christians and Jews, because what we think Mashiach, the scriptures, the way we've parsed the scriptures and the way they have, puts us at odds with Mashiach in the temple in the last days. That could be a real problem. That could be the ruse that the enemy is hoping will take hold and keep us from the reunification, which will give us our strength and our birthright under Yahweh to finish the job and to eradicate from the earth this cursed, wicked seed, which plays on all of us. So, hey, how'd you like that? Comment, like, subscribe, share. I'm trying to get the channel upgraded, and I have a lot that I'm going to be teaching. So stay tuned. Look for my classes, my website, theelectlife.org. I'm telling you, I believe this is information that if you have been rocked off your, kind of the last week has sort of shattered a lot of your plans, what you were trusting in, fine. Sifting sand. Let's get back on the plan of Yahweh, and everything will be fine. So, shalom, shalom. Enjoy your day, and I will see you again soon.